Welcome and good evening, everyone. My name is Ryan Blazik. I'm with Environmental Support Division of Eagle, and I'm going to be moderating tonight's public informational meeting. And this is a public information meeting for an NPDES permit application for the Arbor Preserve Wastewater Treatment Plant in Washtenaw County. Hopefully you received the notification that this was a public hearing that was converted to a public information meeting tonight. We'll talk about what that means and why that is a little bit later on. But before we do that, I just have a couple logistical things to go through. This is a Zoom webinar, so all lines are muted during the meeting. So you can hear us, but we can't hear you. You can submit any questions. There will be a Q&A session a little bit later on. And you can submit your questions using the question box in your Zoom toolbar. You'll also be able to raise your virtual hand in Zoom in the toolbar. We'll explain how to do that a little bit later. And we are recording this meeting. This will be posted on Eagle's YouTube channel, and you'll receive a link in a few days to the recording. So with that, I'd like to invite Tom Brom to give some information and introductions of the Eagle staff who are on the line tonight.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ryan. Good evening, everyone, and welcome again. Thanks all for joining us tonight. My name is Tom Brom. I'm a permit writer with Eagle's Water Resource Division Permit Section Municipal Permits Unit, and I'm the assigned permit processor that has been working on this Arbor Preserve Wastewater Treatment Plant application. And so with that, I wanted to briefly go through the Eagle staff that is also joining us tonight. So we also have the Water Resource Division Assistant Division Assistant Director, Phil Argeroff. Phil, I'm not sure if you would like to turn your camera on quickly to say hello. And so I'm not sure if, thanks, Phil. And so we also have the permit section manager, Chris Alexander, Jackson District Supervisor, Tiffany Myers, the Municipal Permits Unit Supervisor, Byron Lane, and after Byron Lane, we have Jackson District Part 41 Engineer Mike Cotton, and the Jackson District Office Compliance Staff, Ken Murchkowski, and Bridget Carver. Joining us also today is Bill Anderson. He is not part of our panelist group, but he is the lead engineer with Atwell, a representative of the applicant, and he'll be listening in just to listen to tonight's feedback. So thank you as well for joining us, Bill. So first I want to go through, we appreciate all the public input that we've received so far. I've received a lot of phone calls and email messages, and we always appreciate public input and value feedback that we receive on our permits, and everything will be taken into consideration when making our decision to issue the permit. And so as Ryan said, this meeting has been converted from a formal public hearing session to a more of a public information meeting here tonight. Recently, this last Friday, June 25th, the applicant requested of Eagle to place their application on hold for a period of 120 days. And so we did place the application on hold. Because the application has been placed on hold, the planned public hearing that was scheduled for tonight will not be occurring tonight. Rather than occurring tonight, we will reschedule that public hearing for a later date when and if the applicant chooses to make that application active again and decides that we will move forward with the permit process. Tonight we had scheduled a formal public hearing in which public comments would be able to be made and recorded for the public record. And so that part of this event will no longer be happening. In the future, we were planning on having a brief presentation followed by a question and answer session regarding the treatment plant and our NPDES permit process, and then that public hearing. And that will all be now shifted to that public hearing that will be rescheduled when and if we are moving forward with that permit process. And so public comments that we've received so far will still all be taken into consideration. And I'm still, I know I was still receiving comments today, and that public comment period associated with this event tonight will remain open until July 9th, 2021, so next Friday. Up to that point, we still will be able to take comments in writing. So as the PowerPoint shows now, there's options to submit via My Waters directly through to me through email or by traditional mail. And so currently we are very hopeful and anticipate that rather than a virtual meeting, when and if we do reschedule this hearing for a later date, we'll have it in person in the local community, so most likely Lodi Township. We are anticipate that will be true, and we are glad that we'll be able to have this meeting where everyone is able to maybe get together in person. And so when that is rescheduled, we will have another 30-day period in which it is public noticed. And so we will again post it in local newspapers, distribute it to the township again. I have a running list here of registrants for this meeting, as well as commenters that I can distribute that notice to directly. And so we're going to just make every effort that I can to make sure that that rescheduled hearing is adequately distributed. And so when we do have that event, if we do have that event, barring assuming that the application process will move forward at a later point in time, it will have a similar format to what we had scheduled tonight, starting with a PowerPoint presentation that describes the proposed treatment plant, as well as the NPDES permitting process that we use to determine what we include within our permits. We will have a question and answer session at that time in which we respond to comments received during the public hearing or during the public meeting. And then following that portion, we will then have the formal public hearing in which official comments can be submitted through the record. I did want to briefly touch on our reasons why that we held this virtual hearing. Just with the COVID-19 emergency, we did transition Eagle events, training, examinations. A lot of what we did was transition, most of what we did was transitioned to online platforms. And we were returning to in-person work based off the guidance of the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, the Michigan Occupational Safety and Health Administration, along with the Office of State Employers. So we are working right now with a return to in-person work no sooner than date of July 12th. So we are anticipating to have greater in-person work here soon. And with that, in addition to those requirements, we also we're trying to follow the resolution that we found from the Washtenaw County Board of Commissioners that allowed for some flexibility for public bodies to determine if a virtual meeting is acceptable. Then lastly, we had a statutory timeframe we had to make sure we held to, in which we had to schedule this public hearing. And so those are the general reasons why we were planning a virtual hearing. And please understand that we were just doing that, making these decisions during the uncertain times. And we are very pleased now that we will be able to have the opportunity, or hopefully have the opportunity now, to have an in-person event. So in summary, just going through what I had said, the public hearing, the formal scheduled public hearing for tonight is, it was not going to occur. It's potentially postponed depending on how the applicant chooses to move forward, whether the application is made, if the application is made active again, and the permitting process will continue. At that point, we will reschedule this hearing and we'll make that in person if we are able to, and that is our intention. And then again, that public note or that new public hearing will be public noticed in a variety of ways to make sure everyone knows when that will be rescheduled. And so tonight we will remain on the line for a period of time to answer general questions regarding this update and any other general questions maybe about the NPDES permitting process and discharge permits. However, that opportunity to provide vocal comments for the record will no longer be occurring. And I apologize if this was any inconvenience or surprise to anyone. I made an effort to reach out to registrants and those that submitted comments, and I apologize if this comes as a surprise to anyone, but we are again happy or looking forward to being able to have this event in person if we are rescheduling the event for a later date. So with that, Ryan, I think if there are any questions that we could answer at this time, I think we can move forward to that portion.
Sounds good. Yeah, thank you for that update and information, Tom. If you want to ask a question, you just can submit your question using the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. If you're on the phone, it looks like we do have some phone-in callers. You can select #2, and that will actually raise your virtual hand in Zoom, and we can call on you. Or if you prefer to raise your hand in lieu of typing in the Q&A box, you can use the hand icon at the bottom of the Zoom toolbar as well. And we will basically be kind of bouncing back and forth between the Q&A that are typed in and people who have their hands raised. So with that, I think we're going to go ahead and start. And the way this will work is I'll ask the question, and then Tom will either answer the question himself or direct it to one of the other panelists to answer. So with that, looks like we have some that are in the chat or in the Q&A box. How do I obtain all records pertaining to this application?
So records pertaining to this application can be found on the MyWater's public notice website. If you go to, there's a website specifically for MyWater's. I don't have it off the top of my head, but it's something along the lines of mywatersdeq.com. We can provide that as well, or you can reach out directly to me to have that website. But there is a public notice page that we post in which all documents relating to the application and draft permitting documents are there. So that'll include the application itself, the anti-degradation demonstration, the draft permit, and associated documents. If you have trouble with that, please reach out to me and I can guide you through that process. And I can also provide those directly to you if you need additional assistance.
Thanks, Tom, and thanks for the question. And here's, I guess, one that's along the same lines. And I think you might have touched on it, and I'm not sure we can answer it, but what are the time periods in the future when comments will be accepted?
Yeah, so I believe I did miss one item on this. So currently with this public event here, we will be accepting public comments until July 9th. In the future, when the event is reposted, it'll have that 30-day public notice period. During that new 30-day public notice period, we will also be accepting comments. So definitively right now, we will be taking them until July 9th. And then at that time for which, when, and if that public hearing is rescheduled, we will then have another comment period open for another 30 days.
Okay, thank you. And then, and those comments, are they going to be part of the record moving forward or need to be resubmitted?
Nope. So all comments that have previously been submitted will remain part of the record. So anything that I received in the last, we had a permit public notice period, the public hearing public notice period, and then the next public hearing public notice period will all be part of the record. No need to resubmit.
Okay, thank you. And there's a question about if the list of public officials will be made available. I think I can answer that to a certain extent, and that we typically don't send out the list of attendees. And a lot of the attendees are calling in by phone and their phone numbers. So we don't have those names associated with that either. What you will be receiving is a follow-up email with a link to the recording at some point in a few days. see here, any other comments on that, or?
No,
The
nothing
next,
from me.
okay, gotcha. The next question, and I'm gonna ask this question and then I'll go to some raised hands. It says, hi Tom, can you please explain the permitting process to the audience? I think they'd like to know the process, decision-making criteria, and appeals options.
So with the permitting process, how I draft a permit is there is a few different steps. We have conventional pollutant effluent limits determined by a permit section engineer. He'll recommend effluent limits for conventional water quality parameters, including CBOD5, ammonia, and dissolved oxygen. At that time, he'll use a model that has inputs from critical low flow conditions of the receiving water, and he has to follow regulations to make sure that the effluent limits that are recommended are protective of designated uses and the dissolved oxygen standards. So we do get one set of recommendations based off that engineer, from the engineer based off his model. Following that, we get toxic parameter recommendations from our permit section biologists. And those are typically based off Michigan water quality standards. And then we also get feedback from our district office staff. So in this case, it was the Jackson district office staff, Tiffany's office, and we have feedback pertaining to maybe different items, industrial pretreatment items, biosolids items, stormwater items. And so we get feedback from them to see if there's any special considerations that need to be taken into account. And so once we have our final effluent limit recommendations and our input from the district office staff, we'll go through with the draft permit process. Our drafts have a number of possible permit conditions. Some of them are unique to individual permits, while some of them are broad, in which every single NPDES permit will have those requirements. And that will be depending on what is being discharged, how much wastewater, treated wastewater is being discharged, items like that. And so that's the typical way to draft the permit. It will then go through a couple of review periods and is reviewed by the applicant, and then we send it to public notice, and that's the stage we're at now.
Okay, thanks, Tom. I'd like to go to one of the, somebody who has their hand raised, which is a phone-in caller, last four digits 5996. We will unmute you, and then you should be able to mute yourself. So Matt, I don't know if you want to, so I should also mention Matt Tomlinson from Environmental Support Division is also on the line and is kind of assisting in the background. Yeah, so phone-in caller, I think you are unmuted on our end. It looks like you're, so you can go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you for the process. I appreciate it. A couple requests. I'm on the home page for Lodi, and we did try to log in, and I understand some were successful, we were not. Would it be possible to put links on the home page that would make it easier to call to link into Zoom? That's one request. I also heard the previous request basically asking for who's who, and that you don't normally give out that information. And because people may call in, it is still helpful, since most interested parties probably don't know everyone, or who's representing the state, who's representing Lodi, who's representing the company. So if some guidance on that would be appreciated. The other thing, and this is a service request, that I would find it very helpful of almost something like a flow chart of the approval process, so we know where we're at and the steps that need to take place. And then I'll close with a comment that what's being proposed is unimaginable. To describe how strongly I feel that this should not go forward. but I'll leave that comment aside. But we need to be able to log in a little bit easier, and hopefully things will be in person. With that, thank you.
All right. Thank you for that question, Matt. I'm not sure if you would be able to go, since the webinar has started, and pull that registration link and drop it in the chat. Do you know if that's something we can do? Or is there anybody else on the line who is having trouble logging in? Can put that in, or can call in via the number? Are you there, Matt?
Yeah, I'll go see if I can find it.
Okay, gotcha. And then as far as the other parts of the question, I don't know, Tom, is there anybody related to the flow chart and providing?
Yeah, I believe we should have, I could put together a flow chart for the broad scale permitting process to show at what point we are in. If that person would like to email me directly, I could respond to them via email. I think that would be easiest, and I can attach the file right there. In terms of providing a list of participants, Ryan, I'm unsure of how we typically proceed with that. I don't know. Chris, maybe you have a feeling for how we want to, or what we can do with that.
Ryan, I think, I've got some bright light here. Ryan, did you mention the policy of sharing participant lists earlier?
Yeah, I had mentioned that that's not something we typically do because people are calling in by phone, and then also, potentially sharing their names. I don't know where that falls under, FOIA and the ability to release that. I guess I wouldn't feel comfortable saying that we can release that without, any additional legwork on that.
Is that something that we can follow up on as far as the Freedom of Information Act, Ryan?
Yeah, we can follow up on that.
Okay, I know when we meet in person, people sometimes choose not to sign in. And so that's one consideration. So, but we'll follow up on that request.
Thank you, Chris.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Chris and Tom. I think those were the three parts of that question. Looks like the comments are starting to pour in, so I'm going to try to get to more of those, and I'm also going to try to get to different people who have comments. Will registered participants be notified by email about the change in venue tonight?
So if I will have a list of registrants provided by Ryan. Correct me if I'm wrong there, Ryan. And I will compile that list to make sure that the notice goes out to all registrants who are interested in the future potential hearing.
Yeah, that's correct, Tom. I'll be sending you a list. Okay. Let's see here. Is a developer's ability to move forward with their project contingent on receiving the permit for a water treatment facility?
So the answer is no to that. The developer we will not be issuing or denying this permit until the developer chooses to move forward. And so that will occur before a decision is made on the permit.
Thank you. What newspapers do you use for announcing public notices for Lodi Township and Ann Arbor?
So we used the Chelsea Sun-Times along with the Ann Arbor News for this public notice notification. I had requested the recommendations from the Lodi Township offices. And so those are the two that we had used for this public notice notification.
Thank you, Tom. Did you do a study regarding impact on the aquifer, or I guess where would that fit in the permitting process, if that's?
So this permit is specifically for the discharge of wastewater to the surface water. The water source or withdrawal of water would not be included as part of this permitting process. That will be addressed by the Drinking Water and Environmental Health Division at a time later in the process, in the developer's process. I'm going to ask Chris or Phil maybe if they could chime in on the drinking water process, because I do not know much about that process.
So the drinking water permits would come at a time when the project would be further along. As Tom mentioned, this is a wastewater discharge permit. So this is the wastewater side, and then there's the drinking water side. And I think part of the question was also aimed at if the project could move forward without this permit. And no, the project couldn't move forward because they need a Part 31 permit in order to and a Part 41 permit to construct their wastewater treatment facility. So I think a lot of the questions are surrounding this particular permit and the drinking water aquifer questions and such. So I just want to remind folks that this is the wastewater side, and any impacts to the aquifer would be handled by and part of a community drinking water supply in the Drinking Water Environmental Health Division. So it's two separate permit processes.
All right, thank you for answering that question. How are the views of the local community and the text of the township master plan taken into consideration in permit determination?
So per the anti-degradation regulations, the applicant must demonstrate that there are social and economic benefits that are necessary to accommodate the lowering of water quality, and the lowering of water quality would just be the discharge of the treated wastewater. And so the zoning, we will accept comments regarding zoning, and we will consider those as part of that anti-degradation requirement to satisfy the economic and social benefits. However, I believe the second page of the permit under the anti-degradation language does state that the acceptance of the that this permit satisfied the anti-degradation requirements is focused on the water quality regulations, and should not be construed or applied that we are saying that this can jump over local zoning rules. So we do accept these comments, and they may be considered as part of that anti-degradation demonstration requirement. However, they may not, they will be considered as part of that requirement there. I think that's all I can say there. Not can say, but that's how we do consider them.
Thanks, Tom. And this is kind of a follow-up on the same. You mentioned the social and economic benefit. Any other specifics on the social and economic benefit that was presented to Eagle?
So the anti-degradation demonstration provided by the applicant was posted along with the public hearing, and that applicant provided a variety of reasons as to why it's socially and economically beneficial. Throughout this public input period, we have received other information from local community members and the township itself and public officials contradicting the anti-degradation demonstration. And so Eagle will review all comments that we received from both the public along with that anti-degradation demonstration, and review all of the information available to us to make that final decision. So we did receive information from both sides, and we take all that into consideration when we move forward.
Thank you. And then can you please explain the community benefit standard? That's kind of along the same lines, unless it's something else, Tom.
Yeah, I am unsure exactly what that question is asking if it's not focused on that previous response.
Okay, gotcha. And then another question, where is the permitting process written down? So maybe where can people find more information on the permitting process? Might help folks on our website or.
On our website, there may be like I know there's a citizen's guide to the NPDES program that may contain information regarding the permitting process. That is on our website under the, if you go through Eagle Water, Wastewater, you get to the NPDES area. And I believe that would have some information regarding the permitting process. Beyond that, I'm not sure if there's other resources that describe it as well, but I think that resource will go through the process.
Got you. Thanks, Tom. Do local ordinances have an effect on the process?
Yep. So similar to what I was trying to speak to earlier regarding ordinances, we can take those into consideration as part of the applicant's requirement to satisfy anti-degradation regulations. However, the zoning ordinances themselves will not be the deciding factor all the time. We take into account zoning ordinances will not be the only factor that we take into account when we are deciding whether or not to issue the permit.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to go to another hand that's raised. Anthony Woodrich, we will unmute you. So that, oops.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, we can hear you.
Great. As I'm sitting here thinking, I'm brainstorming ideas and thoughts. I've heard that Washtenaw County denied this permit originally. Is this true? I've heard that the developer is escalating the decision up to the state. If Washtenaw County's denied this permit, how can the state justifiably override the decision made locally? And lastly, you talk about economic and social benefits outweighing other water degradation issues. I'd like to see the rubric with which you're weighting these factors. And hopefully there's health, safety, and drinking water rights and consideration of existing residents in that rubric. Notice that the well is very close to a dioxin spill, that there's been no progress in cleaning up. Over the last 30 years, that dioxin spill is slowly spreading under all of Western Ann Arbor. And it's a seriously bad idea to consider sucking part of that dioxin aquifer.
So your questions, could you shorten, I guess go back to specifically what the questions were, just so that
I wrote them down. I've heard Washtenaw County originally denied this permit. Is that true?
okay,
No, Washtenaw County has not denied this permit. This permit is a state of Michigan based permit through Eagle.
Okay.
And was there another part to your question?
So, if this has not been reviewed by local concerns that denied this and it's not being escalated, I understand. So I'd like to see the rubric with which your organization is using to measure and weight economic and social benefits and how that may outweigh the health, safety, and drinking water rights and existing standard of the current residents of Lodi Township, Pittsfield Township, and Saline.
Chris, I see that you are got your microphone unmuted, so I'm going to let you take this one.
Sure, I'm happy to. Thank you for the comments. I guess I want to step back and walk through a little bit about the wastewater discharge permit process. So Tom mentioned that this is a state permit. This permit's issued under state and federal law under the Federal Clean Water Act. And so Michigan has Part 31 law and several administrative rules that we have to follow when we review any wastewater discharge permit application. So our administrative rules dictate how we review our permits, and permits have to be issued in order to maintain water quality standards in all of the states receiving waters, and including this particular area. So I think there's some question about drinking water aquifers, and I want to bring us back and remind the group that this is for a wastewater discharge permit for a surface water, and so we are not proposing to issue a permit that would jeopardize a drinking water aquifer. We did receive the comments about the concern regarding the Gallman plume and the dioxane. We are, as a state agency, very involved in that particular issue, and many of us in the section work on that issue. So we did see those comments, and we will carefully review them to make sure that any potential impact from that plume would not impact this permitting decision should the application come off hold. And I apologize. I think you had one final question, sir, that I forgot. Was it anti-degradation?
Oh, I'd like to see the rubric that the state is using to measure the economic and social benefits, and the calculations being used to show that the benefits outweigh the risks and the serious degradation of residents of Pittsfield, Lodi, and the city of Saline, the health, safety of the current and existing drinking water.
Okay, thank you for reminding me. So we have a procedure to go through our Rule 98 in our administrative rule. So the rule contains the criteria that we use to review anti-degradation demonstrations. So we can share that information with you if you'd like to see the decision criteria. That information and procedure is also available online as well. If you'd like to take a look at that, we can provide that through this process. Ryan, is there a way that we can communicate with the participants?
Yes, well, we'll be sending you a copy of their email and names and email essentially is what we have.
Okay, thank you.
All right, yeah, thank you for the questions. I'm going to move on to another caller. Next person I have is last four digits 3214. On the phone. We will unmute you and you can unmute yourself and answer your question. I think you're unmuted, caller. You can go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, hi, I've got two questions. First one is, does Red Equities own the property yet?
I'm going to say that I believe so, but to confirm that, I can touch base with Red Equities, but the answer I would have is I believe so.
Okay. The other question, are there other wastewater treatment facilities in Lodi Township right now that exist?
So right next to where this proposed treatment plant is, there is another wastewater stabilization lagoon treatment plant. So that is one I know of. Beyond that, I can maybe Chris, I see you're on, and if you have a response to that, or maybe someone from the Jackson District Office has an idea of what is available in that area.
Yes,
Is that for the trailer park?
Yes, that neighboring one is the mobile home community, just basically right on the corner of Wagner and Waters.
And that's still in Lodi.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, other than that, there's none other?
Hey, Tom, this is Byron. There is one other downstream at the Travis Point Golf and Country Club. They have a wastewater treatment plant as well that discharges to the same receiving stream.
Okay, that's all I want to know.
All right, thank you for your question. All right, and then we're gonna go with one more hand raised, and then we'll go back to the typed in question and answer. So Rich Strader, you're unmuted on our end. You can go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. A couple questions. First was, I think I sent it in the email, but for Chris, you mentioned that, this is basically about, ground, what do you want to call it? Ground level discharge into the rivers. But if this gets permitted, it would be ground level into the Rouse Drain, which flows directly into the Saline River. And that is used to support drinking water in Saline. So have you thought about that as an impact? That's one question. And then my second question, I think somebody mentioned earlier, was, is there a reason why you guys would consider issuing a permit before the local ordinance requirements are met? Because Lodi Township has a well first policy that says that the applicant should have already received a permission to, install a well to support that kind of development that they're asking for. And as near as I can tell, that has not happened. And that could be a substantial impediment to them actually proceeding with this project, because, the aquifer has limited resources, as we all know. And there's a lot of people around the area there that would be interested in whether or not that's going to affect their ability to have wells where they are right now. So that's two parts of my questions. Thanks.
The first part of your question, as far as the discharge to the receiving water, it's to a tributary and then to a downstream larger water body. In this case, the Saline River. So in the state of Michigan, the water quality standards that I mentioned protects surface waters, all of the Great Lakes, and then surface waters that have public intakes for drinking water purposes. That our permits are protective. Our water quality standards do require that we protect them. This particular small tributary itself isn't protected, and as a drinking water source. And what I mean by that is there's not like a public intake in the water body that's pulling water out. So any water body that has a public intake withdraws water from that surface water, and then it takes it to a water treatment plant for further treatment before distributing that water to residents through a distribution system. So yes, the answer to your question is we do take into consideration, and we are required to protect surface waters at the point of intake in waters in the state of Michigan. So we have a few surface water intakes in the inland waters of the state of Michigan left. And then all of our Great Lakes are protected as a source of drinking water. Does that answer your question?
Chris, partially, because, I get that, but what that implies is that you're making point decisions about the intake of water, as opposed to, if you made that decision everywhere in Michigan and said, we're protecting the lakes and the major rivers and none of the tributaries, then ultimately the tributaries would produce a lot of pollutants, right? Assuming they are permitted, they produce a lot of pollutants, and you'd not be able to overcome that when they reach the major rivers or the lakes, right? So, I don't understand why you can say it's okay for them to distribute this down the Rouse Drain because it just flows into the Saline River and it won't be an issue because we'll clean it up when we get there, right? At some point,
I'm not aware of a surface water intake in the Saline River. Byron, is there an intake in the Saline?
Not the city of Saline. There may be something downstream in the Raisin, but the city of Saline has groundwater wells that they use as their water supply.
Okay, sorry about that. That's not my understanding.
That's okay. I just wanted to make sure that I was speaking correctly because we are required to protect that surface water at the point of intake. So near the public water intake, we are required to protect the water for public health and for drinking water. So I just wanted to be sure that I was answering your question correctly.
Yeah, no, thanks. It makes sense.
Sure.
One other comment. The caller mentioned the well first policy in Washtenaw County, and as I understand it, that policy states that before an owner gets a permit for disposal of wastewater from the county, they have to get the drinking water permit first. So well comes before
Correct.
septic. Well become before septic. But in this case, this is not a county issued permit. It's not a septic tank. This would be a state issued permit that would go to the receiving stream. So the policy you referred to doesn't apply to an NPDES discharge. It applies to a groundwater discharge issued by the county, which typically would be a septic tank permit.
Yeah, understood. So that basically says the state overrides the local municipality in this particular case, right?
Not overrides. They're two different.
No, you
statutes.
override it because if you're issuing the permit, basically based on the applicant's, statement that they want to install a wastewater treatment plant, and you have, the township is already by ordinance, right? And their ordinance should take precedence. I know the state's got a lot of authority, but their ordinance states that you must have a well before you can have a septic system, right? Or a wastewater treatment, solution of some sort. So you're just basically overriding it. I get it. I understand. Just want to be clear. You're overriding the local authority.
I don't agree with that. You don't agree with my response, but I don't agree with that. We're not overriding them. They're two different statutes, and we have certain criteria we look at before issuing our permit. If they meet the criteria, then we issue it. If they don't, we don't. And this drinking water well first criteria you mentioned is not part of the state criteria. We can't
Exactly.
So
So Byron, I understand the letter of the law, and I agree you're probably complying with it. But if you think about the logic, right, why do you think there's a well first rule in the county? Because they want to make sure that there's water before there's sewage treatment.
So
right?
I want to make sure we are understanding, this is not a groundwater discharge. Are we understanding? This is a discharge to a surface water.
It's surface water discharge. Yeah, totally.
Right. So Byron was explaining that program applies to a septic system, and most septic systems are permitted at the local level. So This is not a septic system. This is a wastewater treatment plant.
Yeah, I get that totally, Chris. What I'm trying to say is that the applicant is bypassing the normal policy, which is to demonstrate that you can generate, well water's capability in an area before you apply for wastewater treatment.
Okay. So you're saying they should have had their drinking water permits first. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, exactly. That's all I'm saying is, why would you not do that? Right. And the reason that the township asked for that and the county asked for that is because it's not always easy to get drinkable, well water here. There's a limited capacity in the aquifer. And so they're saying, do that first. And this applicant has decided not to do that. Right. And I'm just asking, why would you let that happen then? Just say, hold up, go get that done, and we'll be happy to, consider your permit after you make that happen.
So I do want to, and actually it kind of plays into the second question that you had about local zoning. If this permit doesn't preclude local zoning and those decisions to take place at the local level, this is simply a permit if a facility would be constructed, if they get all of their other, if they get their wells, if they meet the local zoning and whatever those ordinances might be, then they would have a permit to actually apply for a wastewater construction permit to actually build the facility. So you can think of this as one of the many steps necessary in order for the project to go forward. It doesn't trump anything else.
Yeah, no, totally understand that.
And we're gonna have to move on because we have 42 other questions that we have to get to tonight, and I want to make sure that maybe we get to some other questions. So I think we're gonna have to move on, and we've kind of gone through this back and forth a little bit. So Thank you for your question, and thank you to everyone that answered that. Thank you. Okay. Going to go back to the question and open questions in the chat here. Let's see here. I'm trying to get some that maybe we haven't addressed. Well, PFAS, and then parentheses, PFOA, PFOS, part of the parameter list for the effluent waters. Or that's how it's worded, but I think the question relates to is, will PFAS part of the parameter list for the effluent water? So will they have to test for PFAS? I'm guessing the question is.
So PFOA and PFOS are not included in the final effluent limits for the permit.
Okay, thank you. One question, how many people are attending this meeting? I have 84 people online right now. And then one here. This is kind of a long one. One concern many agencies in Washtenaw have is that private systems have a history of poor performance that ends up with premature investment by property owners. Livingston County documented this in detail about a decade ago because they stepped in to take ownership of a dozen private facilities that had a range of problems. The developer puts in the most cost-effective option that meets requirements. We have heard that this played out on a private plant at Thornton Farms in Lima Township. The MI Waters info for Thornton Farms is a large volume of compliance documents of over 5 years. Can Eagle provide an overview of the issues at Thornton Farms and the nature of any substantive improvements, including the age of the facility? Understanding that this may not be available at this time. I know that was long. Do you need me to repeat any part of that, or do you have the gist of the question?
Let me answer this one, or try to start out answering this one, Ryan, if I could. This is Phil Argeroff. Evan, thanks a lot for your question. It's actually a really, really good question. We do have issues more with some of our smaller private facilities than larger regional plants or larger facilities. And we could actually use your help. We could use your help in Washtenaw County to help with maybe some of the other wastewater treatment plants like Ann Arbor or Saline or Ypsilanti Community Utility Authority, looking at areas that are developing within the county and letting us understand that they may be able to take some of the increased capacity. We know where development's happening, and one of the ways that we can address some wastewater issues through the county, this is a county of growth, is by looking at some of these regional wastewater treatment plants. That said, it's another issue that our permit section can't fully deal with based on our current regulations. So they're following the law, they're following the anti-degradation procedures, they're doing what needs to be done. They're welcoming any additional comments to the anti-deg procedures. But certainly, the county can also help us by looking.
I think we just lost Phil. Oh, there he is. Oh, you're muted, Phil. Oh, there you go.
Yep, I apologize. My screen just went out. It's some of the internet issues in Western Washtenaw County, where I live. But honestly, this is an issue that we're trying to deal with across the state. We're following the requirements that we have in our Part 31 and under the Clean Water Act. But locals can also help us by taking a look at regional facilities or other facilities within the collection or within the county, and maybe potentially taking those flows. And Tiffany can answer any specific questions on Thornton Farms.
Hi. Yeah, the biggest issue at Thornton Farms, well, first you asked when it was built. I believe it was like 2004, 2005. So it's 15, 16 years old. The biggest issue there was meeting their phosphorus limit. So there were a lot of compliance issues. The residents there did have to pay for them, pay a fine through an administrative consent order. They did have to do some upgrades at the plant, although most of the issues were operational issues, not necessarily big plant upgrades.
Okay, thank you. Anything else on that one? Okay. Let's go ahead and move on. I just saw a question, okay, that I don't think we've touched on yet. In the event of a major equipment failure, what is the mode of operation? Does untreated sewage flow into the Rouse Drain? I don't know if I'm pronouncing that, Rouse Drain. And how long? How can it be shut down? So that's kind of the first part. Maybe we'll start with that. In the event of an equipment failure, what is the mode of operation? What does untreated sewage flow into the drain, and for how long, and how does it shut down? I'm assuming this is on the previous proposal that they had submitted. Is that something that we can speak to at all based on the treatment type or anything like that? Or
So Tiffany, I was hoping to pass this one on to you to speak of what occurs with compliance if that occurs.
Sure. I mean, we would do what we could to keep the length of time to a minimum. Of course, you can't shut it down completely if there's people living in those homes. But we would work with the owner. If the local unit of government isn't willing to sign on to an agreement to take over operation, the facility is required to have an escrow account. So they should have some money there for maintenance if there's a major equipment failure to get it fixed in a reasonable amount of time.
okay, thank you. And then the next part of that question is who will be the owner operator? What is their track record and financials? And maybe the answer to this question is related to the operator certification and how that works. I don't know. Tom, is this something that you or someone else would want to be able to pick up? Who is the owner operator? What is the track record and financial?
The owner would be the applicant that applied for the permit, Red Equities LLC. As part of their permit application, they had to list a certified operator. I do not have the listed certified operator's name in front of me, but they had to indicate a certified operator that would be in charge of operating the plant as part of the application. And the permit requires a certified operator to be operating the plant as well.
Thank you. Will there be a bond as some sort of backstop for the facility? Is the question.
Yeah, we do require an escrow account. I believe it's 5 years worth of operation and maintenance.
Okay, thank you. Tiffany. Let's see here. Some repeated questions. So I'm just trying to find some new, I guess, new information. New questions that maybe we haven't touched on before. One is ask, I guess, about Mr. Argeroff's role. So I don't know, Phil, if you want to mention your title or what, or asking specifically for a public official.
Yeah, I'm the Assistant Division Director in Water Resources Division.
All right. Thank you, Phil.
Yep, sure.
One says a video was submitted showing the extreme high level of the tributary and drain recently. Does your decision include a study of the capacity of existing drains?
So the permitting process does not typically review the capacity of the drains. However, we have received numerous comments regarding these issues, especially recently with the heavy rains. And so because we received these comments during this public input period, we will be reviewing those as part of our decision as to whether or not issue the permit. so we appreciate those comments, and we are taking those into consideration as we move forward.
Thanks, Tom. Given the 120-day delay, can the permit application be filed in less than 120 days, or must it be resubmitted after a period of at least 120 days?
So the 120 days, thank you for the question. The 120 days is a number that the applicant proposed. Our holds, we do not have a end time on our holds. The holds that we input for our applications are indefinite, and so there's nothing that says that the applicant cannot keep it on hold for longer than 120 days or remove that hold before that point. That was merely an estimate from the applicant as to how long they expect the hold to last.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Many of the objections to the project are about land use in general, not the wastewater permit specifically. Is there a problem with the planning and zoning process that we need to manage land use through wastewater permits? I guess I'm not sure how we want to answer that, if we've already touched on it. Any thoughts? Is this a problem with the planning and zoning process that we need to manage land use through wastewater permits? So it sounds like the objections are about land use in general. And
yeah, I'm uncertain how to directly answer that or specifically answer that. The zoning and land use comments that we have received would be considered as part of those anti-degradation decisions that we make and that process that Chris spoke about earlier.
Got you. All right, thank you. And then a question about aquifer testing. What data is available about aquifer testing, drawn down testing, and aquifer depletion to set the 2 type 1 community wells? I don't know if we can speak to that at all as far as.
I'm going to ask Chris or Phil if they know that the Drinking Water and Environmental Health Division has data available.
I don't know if they have data. They have their whole, they have a whole process similar to this process that they would look at those wells and capacity and such. So that would be something that we can provide the contact information to after this call.
Thanks, Chris.
Okay, thank you, Chris. And then there's some more comments about our questions about Washtenaw County denying if they denied the permit. Let's see here. Yeah, I guess about Washington, if somebody heard Washtenaw County, and I can't recall if we touched on this, if they denied the permit and they had heard the developers escalating this decision up to the state. And I think they talked about that a little bit on being separate processes. Anything you want to elaborate on, I guess, about the county and the state and how the processes are different, or I think we already touched on this, but anything you want to elaborate on, or you feel pretty comfortable or pretty good about having crossed that already?
I would just say that the NPDES program, which is what this permit is issued through, is it's a state and federal program, and so this wouldn't go through the county for a decision. And so the Washtenaw County has not denied this permit. We have received some comments from Washtenaw County regarding the permit, but they have not denied the permit.
Okay.
Hey,
Yes.
Tom, this is Byron. I just want to add something as well. Just it seems that some of the questions are getting at the idea. There seems to be the idea. There's that we at the state level are the ultimate approval authority, and we're not. There's lots of different approvals that will be needed for this project. This is just about the discharge permit. The developer will also need to get a drinking water permit from a different entity within Eagle. And then there's a raft of local approvals they'll have to get from the township and from the county. And then ultimately, if it goes through, they'll need a building permit. So there's lots of different approvals they'll have to get. And this is just one of them. And this doesn't override the others. And if we issued this permit, say, and they didn't, and they got denied for other permits, the drinking water permit or the building permit or local permits, other local permits, they still couldn't go. So I just want to make it clear that this is not some overriding overall approval of the project. This is just one aspect of the project. But before this goes forward, they'll have to get lots of other permits at the state and the local level.
Gotcha. That's a good point, Byron. And then, so a couple other, I guess, related to the permitting process. So does developer need the permit in order to build or to proceed with actually building?
Developer would need this permit in order to, Chris or Byron, can you speak on this? I believe I know the answer, but I want to make sure that this is a clear response.
I'm gonna take a educated guess. We're in this business and we kind of know what happens at the different levels, but that's not what we do, so we don't know the details of it. But as I mentioned before, there's lots of other permits they have to get at the local level for the drinking water well, for the actual building permit to build a building, and for other roads and all those approvals. And so no, they couldn't. If they didn't get those local permits to build, then this permit on its own would not approve or those other permits or those other processes going forward. They need permits, the building permit and the other local permits, in addition to our permit.
Thanks, Byron. And just while we're on that topic, kind of along those lines, is approval or rejection of this proposal ultimately go for a vote for residents? Understanding that there are other permits, authorizations required for, so I guess for our permit, does it require a approval or rejection by vote?
No, there will not be a vote for approval or rejection of the permit. Once public input is received today, through the comments that we've received through the future potential public hearing, Eagle will take into consideration all the information that we have, and Eagle will make the decision whether or not to issue or deny the permit.
Okay, thanks. And would court decisions favor one party or the other in this process, I guess? If court decisions would impact the permitting process.
Ongoing court decisions, I know that there may be a court process ongoing currently regarding the township zoning. That would not affect our decision, to my knowledge. It may affect, I can't speak on if that would affect the applicant's decision as to whether or not to move forward. Chris, do you have anything to add with this one?
Any Part 31 permit or any NPDES permit that's issued, there is an appeal process through an administrative appeal process. So 30 or 60 days after a permit is issued, then that decision can be contested or challenged. And so there is a process to challenge this that's separate from any other potential issue, or Tom mentioned, another proceeding. This would be a separate proceeding, but there is an administrative appeals process for any issued NPDES permit.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Chris and Tom. Why does the development not choose to use public water and public sewer systems? I think this was already touched on. Is there a sewer system available, I guess, or?
Phil touched on this primarily with available sewer systems. Lodi Township does not have water or sewer systems available. There are some nearby systems. Pittsfield Township and the city of Ann Arbor is not too close, but the applicant, as part of their reviewing alternatives to a surface water discharge, did connect with Pittsfield Township to see if they could connect to their sewer system, and it was determined to be not feasible. And the Ann Arbor connection was a fair distance away from this development. So based off the information that the applicant provided, they had no feasible existing sewer connections to hook up to. Phil, would you like to add anything? I see you may want to.
Nope, I think that's a good response, Tom. Thank you.
Thanks, Phil.
All right, thank you.
I just wanted to add one thing, Tom. You mentioned that Pittsfield was not feasible. It was more than not feasible. Pittsfield basically said no, that they had already had planned. They were at capacity for their planned service area, and they didn't have capacity to handle this. So it wasn't as though there was some feasibility analysis done. We asked them to ask, and they did. And Pittsfield Township came back and said no.
Okay, thank you, Byron. And then there's questions about, who on the line are public officials. I have a couple questions on here, in addition to one about Phil. Maybe we can go through Tom and identify who's on the phone or who's on the line again as part of our panel. Maybe not in the same amount of detail, but in general, who they work for.
So all who have answered questions by now are members of Eagle. Chris Alexander is the permit section manager, as Phil Ardroff had said. He's the division assistant director for the Water Resource Division. Tiffany Myers had answered some questions. She's the Jackson District Office Supervisor. And Byron Lane is the Municipal Permits Unit Supervisor. And so anyone that has answered questions by now is a member of Eagle.
Thank you, Tom. What are the operational discharge requirements for this type of facility, i.e. licensed waste treatment operator? And I know you touched on that, Tom. Required to be on site while discharging. And what level of equipment redundancy does the state require for these systems? So it's kind of three-part. What are the discharge requirements? Is a licensed operator required to be on site while discharging? And what level of equipment redundancy does the state require?
So, Chris, would you mind taking this question, or Tiffany?
You can answer all three of them, so I'll let you take especially the redundancy question at the end.
Okay. Well, the operational discharge requirements, I think, is really the overarching question, if I'm reading this right. So the licensed wastewater operator is not required to be on site when they're discharging. Someone has to be on site, but in a lot of cases, there's a superintendent that is licensed at the level of the plant. The plants are, there's different levels of plants based on their difficulty. And so someone needs to be on site, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the person that holds the highest license. As far as the level of equipment redundancy, it's been a long time since I've looked at that. There are redundancy requirements based on the type of facility, the water body it discharges to. So I think that's something it's kind of difficult to answer right now because we don't have plans for the actual plants that they're proposing at this time. We won't get those until if a wastewater treatment plant discharge permit is issued. If this permit is issued, then we would get plans for construction. And Mike and our Part 41 engineer in the office would look at those and make sure that the redundancy was being met.
Okay, thank you, Tiffany. All right, we're going to go back to the hands raised. I've got Anthony. I think Anthony already asked a question. Do you have a follow-up question, Anthony?
Yes. Is Eagle aware of the privately owned water treatment plant off of Gray Knoll Trail neighborhood south of Saline.
I am not personally aware of it, but Tiffany, are you aware of a treatment plant in that area?
I am not. I'm not sure which treatment plant that would be.
A coworker of mine is a resident of that neighborhood, and the developer built roughly 70% of the 100 or so homes planned, and then went bankrupt and left. A bank in Ann Arbor had to take over that bank. I had to take over the water treatment plant and is operating it. And as such, the sewage rates for all the residents has more than doubled. And it's a financial train wreck, allowing an LLC to be involved in such environmental health and safety issues, such as an important of a surface discharge water treatment plant. Municipalities are much better for the long haul for such critical facilities.
Do you have a follow-up question, Anthony?
Yes, I'd urge you to understand what happened on the Gray Knoll Trail neighborhood south of Saline, and urge you to consider privately owned water treatment plants before making your decision.
Anthony,
Thank you.
We would agree with you that municipalities do a really good job of providing services, utility services to the public. And Phil touched on this earlier, and he mentioned that regionalization and trying to utilize the existing infrastructure in areas where we could, regional wastewater treatment and for water and sewer. And so we definitely hear what you're saying. The department has had issues in the past. So we definitely hear what you're saying. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question. All right, next person is Shannon Beeman. We'll unmute you and you can ask your question. It looks like you're unmuted at our end. You're unmuted. You can go ahead and start, Shannon.
Thank you, and thank you for hosting this today. So to clarify, this is Shannon Beeman, County Commissioner, Washtenaw County. My question is, the Board of Commissioners of Washtenaw County, Saline City, as well as other townships have petitioned Eagle to deny this permit. How likely is it that this will weigh in your decision?
So this is Phil again. We do consider all comments that come in, but I think one of the biggest things that I'd like to say is that we've been trying to work with the city of Saline on some previous projects to try to regionalize as well, and that proved to not be successful. So what we would like is, I'd like to start working with the county. I'd like to start working with Saline. I'd like to work with Ypsilanti Community Utility Authority. I'd like to work with the city of Ann Arbor and try to figure out if there are some wastewater master plan items that we can talk about one of these three facilities possibly taking in some of the development in the area. I know it may not be possible. Byron mentioned that earlier. It's great to have a resolution, but I think part of that is dealing with some of the issues as well, which could include taking some additional flow to the wastewater treatment plants.
I still don't think that answered my question.
Let me go back and try to answer your question then. I thought it did. Let's see. You had a resolution and you were asking if the resolution alone will make a difference. I think a resolution will be considered, but it certainly won't be a determining factor because we want to work with all the parties to try to figure out if there's some more consistent ways to actually regionalize the system. So resolution does one thing, but I think honestly, what will really help is a better understanding of how to deal with the extra sewage and to take it to some regional facilities.
With that, how quickly would something like that come to fruition?
Well, it would take commitment from the locals. It would take commitment from Washtenaw County. It would take an understanding from some of the other wastewater treatment plants. So I think we are, you know, if we're concerned about some of the smaller wastewater treatment plants and some of the operational issues that could happen, it doesn't mean they always will happen. Some of the impact on water quality, if we're looking for how to address those issues, I think there needs to be good conversations between our division and Washtenaw County to start these discussions on how we have a good quality master plan for wastewater purposes, a facility plan that's done so that we can try to look at connections to existing wastewater treatment plants.
Phil, if I may, I'd like to just add to what he was saying, Shannon, and that's that as a permit unit, we see quite a few of these, and so I mean I think we're dealing with 3 right now around the state. It's an issue. It's an issue that we recognize, and we need, honestly, we need help at the local level, as Phil is saying, because we have a criteria we have to use to issue these permits, and he mentioned the Celine situation just last year, where we were faced with that, and as he said, we tried to work with the local unit of government. We spent the better part of a year trying to facilitate discussions between the local unit of government and developer to get that wastewater going to a public plant instead of a small package plant, but it just didn't happen. We don't have the authority to make it happen. So we really do need the help of the local officials to help facilitate regionalization. And I said that to say that this, you're talking about time frame. Well, can this happen before this project is over? Well, time will tell. We don't know how long it will take before this project goes forward, if it does. But I can tell you for sure that there's going to be more. We have another one we're dealing with south of Saline right now, and you know better than I do how popular and how Washtenaw County is. And so there's going to be growth there for the next 20, 30 years. And believe me, there's going to be more of these plants proposed. And so better to get started now, because if it may not be in time for this one, but maybe it'll be in time for some of the others.
Thank you. I'm going to say that I'm a willing participant in collaboration.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thanks for your question. We're going to go to another hand raised. This will probably be our last raised hand because we're getting closer to, I believe, 7:30 is the time we were slated to wrap up. But the next person is Sue Schenk. Sue, we're going to unmute you, and then you can ask your question. It looks like you're unmuted. You can go ahead and ask it when ready. We can't hear you, Sue.
Thank you. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Oh, there we go. Yep.
Thank you so much for hosting this tonight. I appreciate it. My name is Sue Schenk. I am chair of the Washtenaw County Board of Commissioners. I'm concerned in hearing some of the comments. It sounds like this development is like this development, and it's just a question of whether the sewage will be cared for by a public plant or a private one. It's my understanding that the master plan of Lodi Township does not envision a development of this scale in the base, and that may be why it doesn't fit. So I would ask you to please listen to listen to the elected officials as we say that we are hearing from the community that this development is not in the public interest. There is no net benefit to it. And I realize this sounds more like a statement than a question. That's just where it is. And so I would ask you to please, will you listen to us? Thank you.
Thank you, Sue, for your comment, and we appreciate the input that we received from many local community members in the county, and we will be taking that into consideration. And we do appreciate all the input that we have received regarding the interests of the local area.
Tom, this is Byron. I'd like to just add a quick comment and maybe a question in return to Sue Schenk. And that's, it's a frustration that I sometimes feel at the state level. And that's that, we get questions like that saying that, they would like us to make decisions based on local desires for zoning or planning. And we don't, in many cases, we don't have the authority to do that. So my question is, I would like to think the local authorities had the authority to make that call. If they have a development such as this that they think doesn't fit into their master plan or doesn't fit into their zoning, can't the local unit of government do something about it? Because it seems like they're pointing the finger at us and saying, well, Eagle, you're issuing this permit, or they're coming to us asking, will you not issue this permit because they're not abiding by our local requirements? And we often don't have the authority to deny a permit based on that. But my thought is, okay, if they don't abide by the local unit's requirements, then can't the local unit do something about it? And I'm saying that because I don't know. I'm not a local authority, and I've been around a long time, but I don't know how that works at the local level. But it just seems to me that the local authority should have the the requirement, the ordinances, and the authorities to prevent a building that doesn't meet their master plan and their zoning requirements.
All right. Thank you, Byron. Yeah, and to all of the panelists for answering those questions. I think we're going to wrap up the question and answer session right now. I should also mention, I think we got to most of the questions in the chat. We may have not gotten to yours specifically, but I think we touched on almost everything that's in there. We will also be providing the questions to panelists, to Tom, so that he has them. Before we wrap up, though, I just want to remind people there are other ways that you can make a comment through My Waters at the link that's on your screen. And then also by email to Tom's email, Tom Braum at BRAUMT2@michigan.gov for those of you who are calling in by phone. And then by mail to Tom Braum, BRAUM, Permits Section, WORD, EGLE, and that's at P.O. Box 30458, Lansing, Michigan at 48909-7958. And the comment period after this event will be open until July 9th. Tom, is there anything else you wanted to say about the comments at all?
The only other thing I was going to say is this comment period, I just want to remind everyone, will end July 9th. And when and if we do have a formal public hearing scheduled post application hold, there will be another opportunity for comments and questions and answers at that time.
And then Tom's contact information is up here. If there are additional questions, phone number 517-331-7377, and email again, BRAUMT2@michigan.gov. And at this point, wondering, Phil or Chris, if you have any closing comments for everyone?
On behalf of all of us at Eagle, we'd like to thank you all for attending, for taking the time out of your evening to attend we understand there's a lot of passion here, and we have received many comments that we will consider, as Tom said. And if this application is taken off hold, we know there was a very strong desire to meet in person. We also would like to meet in person. If this goes through, if the application is taken off hold, we will set up a public meeting and hearing in your area. So we will come to you in person. So we'll be able to talk to you in person. So we appreciate all of you and the time. So I think there were some comments, Ryan, in the chat about providing our name and our titles. So is that something that when we reach back out to participants, we can provide?
Yeah, I'm sure what will happen is I'll provide information to Tom, and then I believe Tom will follow up.
Okay.
And I'm assuming he can provide that information.
Okay. Yep. I just want to make sure that we get that request so they know who we are and what role we play. So thank you. Have a good rest of your evening.
Yeah. Thank you, Chris, and to all of our panelists. Thank you for answering all of those questions and for all the great questions that everybody asked. This kind of concludes our public information session tonight. I hope you all have a great evening. Thank you.